Good Friday morning, and welcome to episode 4 of Commentator's Corner. Tyler Reedy with you today. Brendan Prizeman is not here. He'll be back next week, so just me today on this Friday morning, and still a lot to talk about, starting with prep football. And in case you missed it, prep football is back. What a win last night, 41-7 over the 4th-ranked Lincoln Southeast Knights. Prep was ranked 9th going into the game last night, and they just came out firing right away and stomped the 4th team in the state. So looking at how that game played out, it was really two things, and it's the two things that Prep has been doing all season long: their run game and their run defense. It's Prep's new identity. It's the first time we've really seen Prep have a true identity and just have a way that they can beat just about any team in the state, and they showed it last night for sure. Jack Stessman went for Jack Sussman went for 93 yards on 14 carries. He scored twice. Shamar Brown, the normal lead guy, he saw a lot of action in the first half. 88 yards on 12 carries, 2 touchdowns. Jack Pernicke only had to throw the ball 10 times. I mean, anytime you can have your first-year starting quarterback only have to throw the ball 10 times and still win by 34, it's a pretty good night for your offense. So Shamar Brown runs for 88, Stessman 93. George Egan added 41 yards on the ground and a touchdown. And then Pierce Johnson ran for 15 and a touchdown himself. So big win for the Junior Jays, 41-7. The defense as well was a key. The run defense just continues to roll. Lincoln Southeast came into the game with a runner in Max Butenbach, who had 145 or more yards in every game so far to start the season. And he only had 38 last night on 18 carries. So Prep holding him to just over 2 yards per carry. Southeast passing offense was pretty good, as Prep was so keyed in on the run, as starting quarterback Willem Reddick threw for 234 yards on a 20-for-30 line, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, but certainly not enough to overcome that tough Prep defense. And be very interesting to see after the rest of the games play out tonight how far the Junior Jays can move up, as they'll get set to take on Millard West next week. And if the rankings hold, Junior Jays will not have a ranked opponent on their schedule for the rest of the year. So chance to really, really generate some momentum off of this win, heading down the line to end September and move into October and playoff season as well. So big win for the Junior Jays. They go on the road to Millard West next week. We're still working with the live streaming folks over at Millard West to see if Brennan and I will be on the call. So it's a chance we have that. If not, they will be providing a free live stream on Strive TV. So should be a fun one down there. Obviously, it was a great game last year, and Millard West always plays hard no matter what their record is. So could be an interesting game, but no doubt about it, Creighton Prep has proven themselves to be one of the elite teams maybe in Class A. As they've played the number 1, number 2, or rather number 1, number 3 now with Westside moving back. Number 1, number 3, and number 4 teams in Class A. And all 3 of those games, Prep has lost by no more than 15, and then in one of them, they have come out victorious by 34. So Junior Jays really having no troubles with the top dogs this season. Welcome sign after the last few years. So with that being said, we'll move on from the Junior Jays into some more sports, talking about the NFL. Thursday night football last night. New York Giants and the Washington football team. A game that many expected to be kind of, two teams not very great. Poor starting quarterback play, Daniel Jones, Taylor Heineke. It was a great game. I mean, football team wins it 30-29 as Taylor Heineke, what a game last night. It looked like throughout most of the game, he was kind of going to be a hero. He had some great totals. You look at the stat line for Heineke as I pull it up here. He went 34 for 46, 336 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. That's a great night, especially against what I think is a pretty underrated Giants defense. They were great towards the end of last season, but Heineke had a great night until he threw an interception late in the game with his team up by 1. Giants went down the field, kicked a field goal to take a 29-27 lead, and then wouldn't you know it, Taylor Heineke leads his team down the field on a game-winning drive. And Dustin Hopkins' field goal, at first, it was no good wide to the right. 43-yard try, it was 48 at the time. He missed it right the first time, but the Giants lined up offside, so we got a second try with no time left. And booted it through the uprights from 43, so the football team wins it 30-29 in a game that had 6 different scores in the fourth quarter. Giants kicked 3 field goals in the fourth. Washington kicked 2 field goals and added a touchdown as well, and a great catch from Ricky Seals-Jones. He absolutely mossed a defender for the game's final touchdown last night. So look at some of the stats as well. Saquon Barkley for the Giants starting to ease back into things a little more. Saw a few more touches than he did last week, obviously coming off that torn ACL a season ago in Chicago. Barkley, 13 carries, 57 yards. He popped a 41-yard run at one point in the first half, so definitely a good sign for him. Daniel Jones had one of his best games really in his NFL career, going 22 for 32, 249 yards, 1 touchdown, 9 rushes, 95 yards, and 1 touchdown, nearly hitting the 100-yard mark. And I think the most important thing for Daniel Jones, no turnovers. He's a guy who's known to fumble quite a bit. He did it again last week. He can be very, very turnover prone. He's already had 40 in the league, but none last night, which is especially impressive considering the defense he was going up against. Those guys in Washington are very, very stout, especially on the defensive line. So great game in the NFC East last night. Giants fall to 0-2. Washington gets back to 500 at 1-1. So take a look at the rest of the games set to take place here in Week 2. You got the Cincinnati Bengals visiting the Chicago Bears at 12 o'clock on Fox on Sunday afternoon. And Cincinnati, they're feeling good. Beat Minnesota last week 27-24 in overtime. And tell you what, that offense in Cincy looks pretty legit. Joe Burrow, obviously the offensive line's going to have their struggles this year. He got sacked a couple times last week, but the weaponry around him, I think, is really underrated. Not many people talk about that Bengals offense, but Joe Mixon at the running back position, he's a stud, went for 100 yards last week. You got a strong wide receiver core, including Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, 2 guys that have already proven themselves, and then you add Chase, who also went for 100 yards and a touchdown last week. So that Cincinnati offense was very, very good last week, and I think they'll continue to roll against a Chicago team that it's just really hard to find a strength for. The offense under Andy Dalton had severe struggles last week in LA, only putting up 14 points against the Rams, and then the defense got torched. Matt Stafford had a night against that Bears D, so I've got Cincinnati winning pretty easily on the road in Chicago. Moving on to the Texans at the Browns. This is maybe the easiest game of the week to predict. Cleveland was really impressive, even though they lost last week against the Chiefs. 33-29 was the final score of that loss at Arrowhead, but Cleveland came out first half. They ran the ball. Obviously, they have that potent 1-2 punch with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and Chiefs look helpless against it. That first half, it was just all Cleveland, quite frankly. They had a 22-10 lead at halftime of that game, and Kansas City's defense was able to step up. Patrick Mahomes was Patrick Mahomes, and Chiefs were able to come back and get the win. But Cleveland looked legit. They're certainly an AFC championship contender, and Houston had a good week last week as well, but I think that's more of Jacksonville just being really, really bad than Houston being good. The final score of that game last week for the Texans, 37-21 as they beat Jacksonville. But Cleveland, I think they roll. I've got something like 35-13 for my score prediction. That defense is going to come out. I know Tyrod Taylor's experienced, and that could help a little bit for Houston to kind of overcome that stout Cleveland D, but I just don't see Houston having a chance in this one. Big win for Cleveland. They get back to 1-1. So next up's a pretty good matchup. 2 new quarterbacks for their respective teams. The LA Rams and the Indianapolis Colts. You got Carson Wentz and Matt Stafford going head-to-head in Indy. And tell you what, the Rams last week, I talked about it when I was talking about the Bears. They rolled 34-14 win. Matt Stafford looked like he had the most fun he's ever had playing football after all those years in Detroit. Looked rejuvenated with the Rams, and I think that continues. I think the Rams win it 27-16 over Indianapolis. So Colts fall to 0-2. I think the AFC South might end up being just a little bit weaker than some of us expected. I think a lot were thinking that it might be a 2-horse race with Indianapolis and Tennessee at the top. Tennessee's already 0-1. Colts are already 0-1. I still think it's going to be those two duking it out, but maybe a little bit of a lower record than some might have expected. So Rams win that one. Bills and Dolphins. This one could be a little bit interesting. Miami coming off a solid win, 17-16. Good defensive performance on the road in New England last week. And then Buffalo coming off that surprising loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers at home, 23-16. Final score of that one. Buffalo now going on the road to Miami. I think Josh Allen's going to bounce back. I think he's going to have a big day. I can see 25 plus fantasy points, maybe 3 or 4 total touchdowns. I think he bounces back in a big way. I think the Bills get the win, 27-23. But Miami, that defense, I think will keep it close. I think Tua has a pretty solid game. That Buffalo defense struggled late a little bit against Big Ben and the Steelers, as surprising as that was. But got the Bills in a pretty close one, so they get back to 1-1. Dolphins fall to 1-1. Then the Patriots and the Jets, another battle of new quarterbacks, although these two guys are rookies. Mac Jones for New England and Zach Wilson for the Jets. And I think this is going to be close. I think it's going to be low scoring. I think Zach Wilson has a slightly better day than he did against Carolina last week in that ugly 19-14 loss. But I think the Patriots will pull it out 23-20. It's going to be close. It's going to be a battle. I think it could go either way, but I think Mac Jones definitely looked a little bit better in his debut against Miami last week than Wilson did against Carolina. So I've got the Patriots in that one. 49ers at the Eagles. I think this is going to be a really good game. Maybe one of the more underrated games of the week. Philly's coming off a nice win over the Falcons. 32-6 as Jalen Hurts went for 4 touchdowns. He looked phenomenal, picking up right where he left off at the end of last season when he got those few starts. Then San Francisco had a weird win. They led 38-10 over Detroit. Final score ended up being 41-33. Lions nearly tied the game. So San Francisco, a lot of stuff to sort out there with them. Not sure exactly what to make of them to start the year, but I think it'll be a close game. I think it could go back and forth, but I think the experience of the 49ers helps them a lot. I think the head coaching of the 49ers is definitely a little bit more solidified. So I've got San Francisco winning 31-27. I think it could go a little bit of a shootout, despite that San Fran defense being very good. So 49ers over Eagles. How about the Raiders and the Steelers? This one could be pretty good as well. Pittsburgh coming off an upset win. Raiders coming off an upset win over the Ravens on Monday Night Football. I do think it'll be the Steelers, though, 28-20. That defense will make some plays late. I think the Raiders will have some success early on, but Big Ben, he can be good late in games, and that defense, always is for Pittsburgh. So I'll take the Steelers in that one by a touchdown. Saints and Panthers coming up as well at 12 o'clock. New Orleans, what more can you say about them after what they did to Green Bay? 38-3 victory last week over Aaron Rodgers and company. I mean, Rodgers just looked lost. I think he only had something like 1 fantasy point through 2 interceptions. It was just as ugly as could be for Green Bay. So we'll see how the Saints play. Not sure if they'll have a letdown on the road in Carolina. They could have their hands full as that Panthers offense looked pretty solid against the Jets. I know it was the Jets, but Sam Darnold had a nice day. You all know about Christian McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. Certainly some weapons on that Carolina offense, and I think they do keep it close. But New Orleans, I do have them winning at 24-23. Broncos-Jaguars, that one in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence could have a better shot at his first NFL victory in this one, but I don't think it's happening. Denver went on the road to New York last week to play the Giants and looked really good running the football. So I think they're going to do it again. I think Teddy Bridgewater playing quarterback for the Broncos adds a lot more to that offense. I think you have some much better consistency. You can put a lot more faith and trust in that quarterback position with Bridgewater. And I think that offense just flows a lot better as a whole with him. So I think the Broncos go on the road, beat the Jags by a couple touchdowns. Getting into the late afternoon games, you got the Vikings at the Cardinals in a game that I fully expect to be a shootout. But Arizona coming off that 38-13 win over Tennessee. Kyler Murray threw 4 touchdowns, ran for a touchdown as well in that one. And I think he'll keep it rolling. Arizona 31, Minnesota 24, in what should be a great football game. Buccaneers-Falcons, another pretty easy one to predict. That game taking place in Tampa. I've got Buccaneers 31, Falcons 17. Tom Brady continues to roll. Got the win last week on opening night against the Cowboys. And I think we'll see a little bit more of that Buccaneers run game with Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette on Sunday afternoon. So Buccaneers, pretty easy one over the Falcons, I think. And then the Cowboys-Chargers, another underrated game in my opinion. Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott. That's a pretty nice looking quarterback duel. Dak looked great last week in his first game back from the leg injury that he suffered week 5 last year that ended his season. And then we all know about Justin Herbert, Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2020. Those two duking it out, and I think the Cowboys will prevail 30-27, but it's going to be a good game. Several passing touchdowns coming in that one for sure. And then the final late afternoon game of the day will be the Tennessee Titans and the Seattle Seahawks at 3:25. It's going to be another good game as well. Tennessee definitely looking for a bounce back as they were just demolished by Arizona a week ago. Seattle looked great over Indianapolis, 28-16. They won it last week. Russell Wilson throwing for 4 touchdowns. I think it continues. That Tennessee team, I know a lot of people were high on them for picking up Julio Jones and obviously still having Tannehill, Henry, and A.J. Brown. That defense isn't very good down there in Tennessee. They've got some good linebackers, but secondary can be an issue, and it certainly was a week ago against Arizona. So I think Russell Wilson has another excellent performance, and I've got Seattle winning by maybe 3 or 4 points in that one. And then Sunday Night Football, Chiefs and Ravens meeting up for the 4th consecutive season in Baltimore in front of what should be a raucous crowd for the Ravens home opener. And Mahomes in September. That's all I can really say. He's 11-0 now. He hasn't thrown an interception in those 11 starts in the month of September, and he's on the road in Baltimore. And despite the crowd, despite a tough Ravens defense, I think the Chiefs get it done and win it 34-20. So it should be a very good game there. We'll see if Lamar Jackson can bounce back a little bit from a tough game last week against the Raiders. And then finally, Monday Night Football, Detroit Lions at the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers is probably pretty mad after the way last week went, and we all know how Aaron Rodgers plays when he is mad. I think the Packers get off to a hot start against the Lions. Jared Goff played well in garbage time last week, and I think he'll do it again, down by a couple scores late in this one. So I think it does end up being a one-possession game, something like 27-20 maybe, but Green Bay wins pretty easily over Detroit. So that will wrap up the NFL. Last night, football team winning over the Giants 30-29, and then you got the rest of the games coming Sunday and Monday. Again, a full slate, all 32 teams in action. So with that, we'll move on to college football. And last week was some kind of eventful. The big story in week 2 of NCAA was Oregon, at the time the number 12 team in the nation, going on the road to Columbus to beat third-ranked Ohio State 35-28, a statement win for the Pac-12. And I tell you what, the Pac-12 is desperate for a big-name team to make some splashes because, I mean, USC has been down the last few years. They were supposed to be good this year. They were ranked, I think, 15th or 14th, just lost to Stanford in an upset. So they've been down. Stanford hasn't been relevant for a while. Arizona State's been in and out of the picture. But Oregon, after the win over Ohio State, they're the 4th-ranked team in the land. So season ended today. They're in the playoffs. So that's a big win for the Pac-12. C.J. Verdell went for 161 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, added 34 receiving yards and a touchdown through the air. So 195 scrimmage yards, 3 total TDs for Verdell. And Ohio State still hasn't begun conference play just yet, so plenty of time to rebound. But that loss, I think, does open the door just a little bit in that Big Ten East. You got teams like Penn State, you got teams maybe even like Michigan, hungry to try and dethrone the Buckeyes for the first time in a while. So see how things play out. And speaking of Big Ten East teams, there's a big game going on this week with Penn State and Auburn. Over in Happy Valley, Penn State is number 10 in the country. Auburn is number 22. And that's going to be a whiteout game in Penn State, so certainly tune into that one if you want to see what a great atmosphere in college football looks like. But Penn State, yeah, it's a whiteout. Yeah, the crowd's going to be crazy, but they're only 8-8 in their history of playing in front of a whiteout crowd. So, don't think it's a guaranteed surefire win over the Tigers. So could be an interesting game. Bo Nix has looked much improved to start the season as Auburn's starting quarterback. And their run defense as well has been excellent, although they've played some much weaker opponents than Penn State has. But Penn State already has a resume win over Wisconsin back in week 1. So could be a close game, but I think it might be Auburn pulling this one out. I think Bo Nix has proven himself that he's made improvements over the past year, and I think he goes on the road and gets it done in Penn State. I think that defense is a little better than that of the Nittany Lions. I think they're going to be able to shut down that Penn State rushing attack, and I think Auburn goes on the road and gets it done in a pretty close one. Going back to week 2 last week, Notre Dame, my Fighting Irish, survived another scare, and Toledo was the opponent. Yes, a group of 5 team, Toledo, was on the road in South Bend and nearly beat the Fighting Irish. 32-29 was the final score. Notre Dame coming out on top, and that's back-to-back 3-point wins over unranked opponents for Notre Dame to start the year. So they certainly need to turn around in a hurry. They'll have Purdue at home, another unranked team, coming up in week 3. Finishing things out on week 2, the Cyhawk game, a big game for a lot of people around here. Iowa and Iowa State. Iowa was number 10 in the country. The Cyclones were number 9. The Hawkeyes won it 27-17 as Brock Purdy just did not have a very good game at all. That Iowa defense seems legit. They held Indiana to 6 points, and now they hold Iowa State to only 17. So Iowa proving themselves as the top dog in that Big Ten West and a potential playoff contender. They're up to number 5 in the rankings after that win. So big win for Iowa, big win for the Big Ten. And then finally, Arkansas and Texas. Brendan better be lucky. He better be happy he's not here today because Texas lost 40-21 to an unranked Arkansas team. Texas was number 15 in the country, but Arkansas came out. They were fired up all week. That crowd was something else down there in Fayetteville, and they just ran the ball down the Longhorns' throat. 333 rushing yards for the Razorbacks as they beat Texas by 19. Finally, I mentioned USC falling to an unranked Stanford, 42-28. Miami, Florida nearly lost to Appalachian State. That was a close one, but aside from that, Texas A&M, 5th-ranked team at the time, only beat Colorado 10-7, so nearly an upset in that one. And looking ahead to week 3 real quick, the big game is in the SEC as conference play starts to get rolling. Alabama, the number 1 team in the country, going down to the swamp in Gainesville to take on number 11 Florida. Bama is the 13.5-point favorite, and I think that's justified. Bryce Young has been solid to start the year. Florida has some serious questions and doubts at the quarterback position, and you can't have doubts at the quarterback position if you want to try to keep up with Alabama. So I've got the Crimson Tide rolling in that one, despite what should be a very nice crowd down there in Florida. So Bama wins that one. I think they'll stay at number 1. And just only 2 other ranked games between 2 ranked opponents. You got Arizona State and BYU. That's 19 versus 23. And then I mentioned Auburn, Penn State earlier. And then the big game for people around here is Nebraska at number 3, Oklahoma, as the Huskers coming off back-to-back victories over Fordham and Buffalo. They're up to 2-1 now on the year. Oklahoma is 2-0. Sooners are 19.5-point favorites, and I don't see why not. The Huskers' offense just has not shown me anything that would lead me to believe that they can take down the Sooners this year. So I think Oklahoma rolls in that one just fine. That game will be at 11 a.m. on Fox. Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt on the call, so should be a fun one. Maybe Nebraska keeps it close, but old-fashioned rivalry, Nebraska-Oklahoma, even if it's a blowout, definitely good to see those 2 teams meeting back up again. So that's it for college football. Should be a fun week as we wrap up the general unranked type of play, great teams versus group of 5 teams, and as we get toward the end of September, get into conference play. So it should be fun as we really get things ramping up in college football. Finally, I'll wrap things up with Major League Baseball over the last week. And tell you what, that home run race is tightening up. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Salvador Perez are now tied at the top for the Major League lead in home runs, each with 45. Shohei Ohtani has 44. So that'll be something to watch down the stretch. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is still a Triple Crown candidate as he's tied for the lead in home runs. He leads the league in batting average with a .317 mark. And then RBI, he's 9 behind the leader, Salvador Perez. Salvi has 112, Guerrero 103. So something to watch there. Giants and Dodgers, San Francisco and LA, both clinched playoff spots over the past week. San Francisco is the leader in the NFC West. They lead the Dodgers by just one game at the moment. So those two teams have just been running away from everybody in the National League this year, and they clinched playoff spots before everybody else. So great to see San Francisco get back in there after 4 or 5 years missing playoffs. Yeah, they haven't been since 2016, so good to see them get back. Dodgers, obviously, a perennial World Series contender, quite frankly. They're the defending champs, and they'll obviously have another shot at it this year. Look back to last weekend at the Subway Series between the New York Mets and the New York Yankees. That was fun. Obviously, you had the game Saturday night being held on September 11th. The pregame ceremonies, the pregame tribute was really cool to see. You had first responders being honored. You had a beautiful national anthem. It was really great to see that kind of tribute in New York on September 11th. And the Yankees did get the win on Saturday, winning 8-7 in a back-and-forth type of game. And then if that game wasn't good enough, the Mets took a 7-6 win on Sunday Night Baseball behind 3 home runs from Francisco Lindor, who has been very, very underperforming so far this year for New York. But he comes through with 3 home runs to get the Mets a big win on Sunday. And Mets are still 5.5 games back in that National League East. Their record is below 500, but as I said, because the East has been so bad, they're still within striking distance of a playoff spot. They just got to get hot and beat some big teams down the stretch. So you take a look at some of the big series this weekend with how the standings rack up. You got the Dodgers visiting the Cincinnati Reds. Dodgers, as I said, already clinched the playoff spot, but they still have plenty to play for, trying to beat out San Francisco for that National League West division title. The Dodgers have not lost the division since maybe 2012, 2011. It has been a long, long time since the Dodgers lost the West, but they're in danger of doing so this year. And then Cincinnati is only a game back, I believe, as I take a look at the standings. Cincinnati is very close to that NL wildcard race, and as I look at the standings, 1 game back of the St. Louis Cardinals for that second wild card spot. So you got the Cardinals, you got the Padres a half game behind them, you have the Reds a game behind them, Philadelphia's 2.5 games back, and then the Mets at 5 games back. So it's all very bunched up in that NL wild card. Should be interesting to see down the stretch how that one plays out, but plenty of big series. Reds would love to win that one over the Dodgers and make a statement, put themselves in solid position to close out the year and potentially steal that wild card spot. Phillies and the Mets, I mentioned Mets, if you want to win that division, if you want to maybe get a wild card, you've got to win big games down the stretch, and this is a big series against a division opponent. The Phillies are just ahead of New York in the standings. Mets will play them this weekend, and Mets picked up some momentum from that win over the Yankees Sunday night, but fell right back flat with a shutout loss to the Cardinals just the night after on Monday. So it's been up and down for New York, but I think division games more than anything else can really generate some momentum for this team. So they've got to get things going, maybe pick up a series win over the Phillies if they want to stay alive in that race. And then Padres and Cardinals, I just told you about the NL wildcard race, and these are two teams that are within half a game of each other, duking it out for that second wildcard spot. So that series in St. Louis is going to be huge, and plenty of star power out there as well. Fernando Tatis Jr. and Manny Machado for the Padres. You got Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt on the other side for St. Louis. So definitely should be a fun series to watch at Busch Stadium. And then finally, you have Atlanta and San Francisco. I mentioned the Giants clinching the playoff spot. They're still battling the Dodgers for first in the West. And then Atlanta trying to hold on for dear life to that NL East division lead. You got the Phillies breathing down their necks. The Mets are trying to make a charge. But Atlanta going on the road to San Francisco can't afford to be swept if they want to hang on to that division, because if you lose the division, you're not getting the wild card, because the top of the division record is so poor for whoever it is in that NL East. So Major League Baseball, keep an eye on it. We're in the stretch run, just over 2 weeks remaining until we reach Sunday, October 3rd, the end of the regular season, and move into the playoffs. Just take a look at how the playoff picture stands right now as far as division leaders go. In the AL, you have Tampa Bay leading the East, defending American League champions. You have the White Sox leading the Central. They'll easily win that division. They're up by 11 games. And then in the West, Houston leads by 7 games over Oakland. And then the National League, you got Atlanta leading the East, as I said, by only 3 games. Milwaukee, who's really come on strong in the second half of the season, leads by 12.5 games in the NL Central. And then the Giants, just 1 game over the Dodgers. And after the Dodgers, it's a 17.5 game drop-off down to the Padres in 3rd place. So Major League Baseball, college football, high school football, NFL. It's the best time of the year, everybody. So keep it tuned into that and keep it tuned in here every week as myself and Brendan, who, as I said, will be back next week, will be covering it and providing our analysis on it each and every week, maybe even twice a week sometimes. So with that being said, I'll sign off for this Friday morning. Junior Jays, as I said, rolling last night, 41-7. You got a good football team here at Creighton Prep. There's no doubt about it. And they've got a chance to really pick up their momentum and keep it rolling over the next few weeks, playing a lot of unranked opponents. They go on the road to Millard West next Thursday night at 7 p.m. at Buell Stadium. So be sure to head out to that one or tune in if you can't make it. Millard West will have that game on Strive TV. Brendan and I might be the guest commentators like we were for Bell West. So I'll wrap it up for this Friday morning. Have a great weekend, everybody, and I'll see you with Brendan next week.